Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of P2G Live. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Majid Waris, and I'm going to be your host. Once again, today we have another special guest with us in the name of Sukhi Wahiwala. Welcome to P2G Live, Sukhi.
Thank you very much.
Now,
much appreciated, Majid.
No, you're most welcome. Thank you for accepting the invitation. Before we get into the real conversation, I've got to share a few details here right now because, Sukhi, you have actually got a lot to do with me being involved with this whole setup.
Really?
Yeah, you probably don't even realize because 2 years ago, I was introduced to Abid Khan, the national director of Chutney and Chat, through a mutual friend.
Right.
And he invited me to a Chutney and Chat business networking event here in Birmingham. And you happened to be the speaker.
Oh.
Now, had you not been so good, I probably wouldn't have come back to Pathway or Chutney again after that.
Was that a bit of a white lie in there?
No.
Had I not been so good?
No. That was completely the whole truth and nothing but the truth. but you know what? That's exactly what happened. And again,
really?
I came back again to the next event, and here I am now. I'm a part of the Pathway team myself. So you've kind of indirectly had something to do with you being here yourself.
Genuinely, honestly, I'm truly humbled. I never, that's.
You know what? The other coincidence is tomorrow is the next Chutney and Chat event here in Birmingham at the Tipu Sultan restaurant. And guess who's the keynote speaker?
Let me think. You, Bunny Chance?
Yes, exactly.
So are you trying to inspire me to be doing the replication as well? Turning up at yours?
It's turned around, hasn't it? It's turned around.
It has. Well, God bless you as well.
But it's amazing. It's been an amazing journey, and it's been a pleasure getting to know you as well, also in the Chutney group.
Thank you.
In the WhatsApp group itself. Now, for those people who haven't known you from before or haven't maybe have come across you before, tell us a little bit about yourself, because I remember you sharing a very fascinating story about yourself on your journey back from when you went into business and some of the adversities you'd faced and some of the challenges that you'd faced and how you overcame them and went on to do better than you were before. So for the purposes of the audience and the viewers themselves, can you give us a bit of a background?
Of course I can. Firstly, I've got to say that both Safraz, Abid, and the whole team, yourself, Majid, really, really humbled to be a part of the CC operation, the Chutney Chat, and also the Pathway to Growth. I've got to say, it's been a great thing to see. The evolution, the growth, the whole flow, it's been really warming. So in context of my past history, I have to start, I believe, if I may, because it's not really about me. Okay, so the reality is that I have to start in a real humble way, a journey about my parents, or more importantly, my grandparents, and how the journey started. So, as a British-born Sikh, I'm born in a little old town called Peterborough, by the way. That's in Cambridgeshire. So, for me, basically, it's not there's no real me involved in it, because I do truly believe in a maker, in God, or in the universe. I know I've been listening to some of your amazing interviews, and it does get quite spiritual. So I appreciate you've got a good audience that understands the possibilities that we're talking about.
Sure.
So the reality is that I'm 7 generations, really, really humbled and honored, 7 generations in business. So we've come from a very early sort of land-owning background in business and structure, and there's always been kind of 3 legs in specific that have been handed down. And obviously, the primary was our spiritual understanding and education, and the second being connected to, in a really humble way, within business. Actually being business orientation. Nowadays, we're talking about it being entrepreneurial in that context. And then there was always like a third element, which was. It was about ethics and understanding that we're going to pass this on to our children. And this is the spiritual belief of our life. So 7 generations, we originated as a family. It's the first time I'm actually sharing this open, and so I'm feeling really comfortable. Thank you for your efforts here. We originate from an area or a space that's called Sialkot, which is actually on the side which is of India, which was originally sliced off to being Pakistan. So
Did you say now it's on the side of India?
No,
now
from
it's on the side of Pakistan.
Side of Pakistan, which is Pakistan itself.
You know what the irony is?
Yes.
Hira, as part of our Pathway team, she's always, she just met you earlier on. She's from Sialkot.
So that's probably why our Punjabi meets quite naturally. Punjabi being our mother tongue. So from a particular place called Duska, And my ancestral run there has been about 6 or 7 generations from that space. I think overall about 5 that we can track back to about 1763. So during the partition period of 1947, when the whole sort of migration carried on with that basically in that time frame we ended up back into a little city called Ambala, which is on the other side, or should I say half of Punjab, nowadays known as in Haryana. And then we didn't stay there too long. This is my ancestral elders and parents, and they basically then moved over to Delhi. So since then, we've kind of been Delhi based. So the conversation arises that we've had a lovely generational, a flow within the family. So that was kind of where I sort of honor my ancestor first, because we really are nothing without our elders, without the nurturing, without moving. So in context of my journey, if I may, just on a real smooth level, it's just that there's a simple level of journey here. I think in around 1991, I was in the same flow as basically the first business that I ever decided to run. I was in the middle of studying as well as taking a business on. There was a really interesting part of my life where I actually always saw my father involved in property development, understanding architectural designs, drawings, and having them. And somehow he had this eye for efficiency. So I just learned standing next to him. I was 8 years old when I saw understood what a load-bearing wall would be. And I think I was about 10 or 11 when I understood the processes of letting a property. And in those days, they used to be called bedsits. We're talking some years ago now.
Before my time, obviously.
Of course, Majid. Absolutely. 100%. Of course, you're a lot younger than myself.
Of course.
So the reality is that I kind of took a really lovely sort of journey within always understanding business and being in flow. My parents, both of them came in the mid-60s. My grandfather was here in the UK around the late 1930s and stayed here until just pre-partition, pre-47, and went back. And before that was my uncle, my older dad's oldest brother. He was also very well established here in the UK as well, in the sense of business, property, that kind of stuff. And he was the implementer of bringing my father into the country as well.
So that's where it started.
That's right. And he was a lot senior. He was about 20 years senior to my father. God rest his soul. And so that was the journey. That's a little bit of background on my parents. Myself, I had a vision. I wanted to be an architect because I just saw this massive paperwork and thought, wow, it's so great. So that was my vision. And I think, to be honest with yourself, around 2000, apologies, jumped into your age there. Around 1990 specifically, I had decided that I was going to continue in A-levels and then move on to that direction. And my selection pot was around architectural flow. At that particular time, my mum, who is just a tremendous part of my life, and so is my father, they turned around and said to me, my mum said that in specific, I think it's your time, and you kind of need to step up a little bit, and we want you to, I never was a naughty child, but, want you to take over one of the businesses. That was the intention. And there was a particular business that was slightly failing at that time, because not due to anybody's inability, but it was more due to a structural change. My cousins were running it before, my brother-in-laws were brilliant business people. They were doing a great job, but they just couldn't, the coordination of switches and changes was slightly bitty. The character dropped. So that was the very first business my father set up in 1967, which was a housewares business as well. And just for reference, I'm very aware that by Nazir Awan and also Nasser Awan, both of those two gentlemen, have a very strong connection and heritage with myself, because we used to buy stock of them for the best part of 35 years. We knew that, and then I was really proud. At some stage, we got to a stage where I was actually sending audio back to them in the noughties and the early noughties. So it's really kind of impressive, for myself personally. So I hope this is kind of what you want to hear, because it's the first time I'm opening up.
It's great. It's great to have you sharing all that. There came a part in your life, from what I remember you sharing with us, where a lot had changed for you. Not only from a commercial or business perspective, but from a personal perspective. And I think both of them kind of intertwined in the change which took place within you, which proved to be the catalyst for change for your future. Tell us a little bit more about what had actually happened, very briefly, and then how your mindset changed from those particular events, which I'm sure you know what I'm referring to.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And how that's helped you up till now.
Humbled. So we're talking about an event that happened in 2006. So I was very much heavy in business and ran a group of companies by that time. I've been very humbled to have a good upbringing, but a very solid grounding. And what happened is that I was never really what we classify as the arrogant business person, even though I know you're attuned to understanding psychometrics and science behind your inner psychology, what we call behavioral psychology. You use that quite effectively within your selling techniques.
Yeah,
well, for around about 20, I think nowadays about 22, maybe even 25 years, I did my very first psychometric assessment way back in 1990. I think it was maybe 91, and I was hooked. So since then, I've been taking a journey on 9 or 10 different versions of psychometrics to understand, which has led me to sort of build my own SynaGus methodology, which I'll talk about later. But the catalyst was very specific in 2006, but prior to that, the journey had already started to understand there must be a little bit more to life than just opening a business, closing a business, selling a product, selling a service, or buying a house and getting it let. There was something that was engaging inside myself for, I'd say, at least a good decade before, because in your 20s, you're on fire.
Yeah.
Bottom line, you're on fire. You really want to build something, and you want to be known for something. And you have this kind of inner gratitude and grit that just says, get out of my way. Just, I'm going to do it. No matter what happens, let's make it happen in a humble way. Well, I'll say towards the end of your 20s, around the 28 era, because I don't want to go, we'll touch a little bit of psychology, of course. The 0 to 7 years of age is what we classify as the imprint period, and then 7 to 14 is also known as the modeling period, and 14 to 21 is known as what we call socialization period, and 21 to 28 is what we know as maturity period. So how does that make any relevance to my journey? Because if you think about it realistically, it was around the 27, 28 years of age that questions start to happen. So at 7, questions start to happen. At 14, questions start to happen. 21, questions start to happen. So the reality was, it was just my time, and there is a real scientific logic to this. Hopefully, may I share in a real humble way that there is a scientific logic that biologically, every single element, in the sense of every single cell within our body, from the very first, which is 3 weeks of your skin, right through to the marrow and the bone, which takes 7 years to actually replace and reproduce itself. So it's the same psychology. And also, if you now go back into the spiritual realm, because I know you're understanding this context of yogic energies and yoga and other spiritual flows, they all run in 7-year cycles as well. It's irony that we call it modern science actually sits directly on ancient science. Now, whether that's from the South Asian, North Asian, or Western worlds, doesn't make a difference. It's still the same. There is only one truth, and it seems to be quite aligned. So, in 2006, what happened to myself was I was kind of on a journey, constantly growing. I was peaking within a brilliant business called Ice Direct. We had grown this to a very large standing. Great, sort of like, I believe, a really honorable time for myself. And myself, my brother, my 2 nephews at the time, we were all very active in the industry, in that particular car audio industry, but so was the rest of the family. So I had lots of staff and team. We call it all our family, the Ice family. And that's when I started to first dabble in understanding of psychology for the external people, because it was internal before, and we were within the staffing systems, within the sales systems, the processes, strategy of how the company grows, and hence why I've become a business modeling specialist. I tend not to use the word expert, because expert tends to stunt people's growth, because we seem to think we've arrived somewhere with an expert. So as a specialist in that flow, we built companies. I was a multiple business owner. So hope I'm not boring everybody here, but I'll keep on going a bit quicker. The reality was that I realized that in 2006, early 2006, I needed a change. And I think my body had started to tell me that I needed a change. Well, I had contracted hepatitis A. And hepatitis A, this is in January sort of time of 2006. It's a liver virus. Luckily, I was a non-drinker. So it didn't really affect me from an alcohol basis. Possibly even that might have been the reason why I'm still standing here today. And I believe that everything has a reason. So the reality was that I got hepatitis A, and that basically was a liver virus that came in through from I'd eaten raw fish. We think we've brought it back to that context.
Okay.
So from that raw fish environment, I contracted hepatitis A, and 6 months later, without going through the actual nitty-gritty of every step, around July the 16th in specific, well, actually, I will. Do you want a bit of a spiritual understanding? I think that would be the first time.
I think that's important because it's one of the reasons we've invited you. I think in the day-to-day chores of driving a business, you know, sometimes we find ourselves coasting, or sometimes we find ourselves just simply getting into a lane where everybody else is in, going through the mechanics of running a business. Seldom do we focus on or even reflect on the spiritual or mental. You know, people have different names for it. That some people just will block it off to say no, it's just a mental thing. Some people will go in more depth and say no, it's a spiritual connection with this,
or they'll call it a consciousness or something.
A consciousness. Yes. So in either respect, it would be interesting to hear your take on the connection, the spiritual or mental or conscious or subconscious, the different connections with the practical elements of running a business.
I'll be honest with yourself, I really am truly humbled to be in this right moment right now. Yeah. Because it's rare that you get a host who understands those balances. So thank you very much. So in context of this, okay, so let's put it into context. I think I went, I purchased a 14-day holiday. And what happened is then the 14-day holiday was purchased 3 days before the holiday was being enacted, around July sort of time. I think it was the 2nd of July I was going to travel. I actually got a phone call, and the phone call was from the holiday agent. And what they did is they'd flipped the story in the sense of the product we purchased 14 days, and they'd called us and said to us, "Oh, sorry, Mr. Wahiwala, we have a problem." And it was my secretary who took the phone call, but sorry, Mr. Wahiwala, we have a problem. It's a 12-day travel, and we can't. We have to give you a refund. And so at that particular time, obviously, you're in the hype of your own clarities and mind. And, you know, maybe at that time there was a little bit of arrogance that was a part of my nature as well. Since then, I'm quite aware of those sort of flows, and I truly understand that. I just try to be humane, because the reality is I'm not going to take anything with me anyway. So I truly understand that. So, okay, so I then turned around and said to the gentleman in a very fast, harsh way, "So what do you expect?" I said, "I am CEO of blah, 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 blah." Yeah. But the reality was, I said, "Look, have you got something else to travel on the 2nd, sorry, because I'm ready to go. We've made all the conveniences, you know, the arrangements are done. I'm taking 2 weeks off." Yeah. And he said, "No." Okay. I said, "Great. So would it not," and this is, I suppose, the first element where I'd calmed down and actually given some kind of feedback to him, and I thought I'd stretch the mentality, which I'm truly humble for. I said, "Would it not be a good idea if you turned around and offered me," because I was going to Florida, "would it not be a good idea if you just offered me maybe the hopper passes or something in the context, and not cancel the holiday, and just give me some more extra value, and then I'll be extra value, and that might be comfortable. Is that fair?" That's something odd to ask. "Would you be happy with that?" And I said, "Of course." Why don't you try me?
I'm waiting for you to ask the question.
Just try me before I know that, you know. So anyhow, so bless him. He did. He went away and he made it happen. And so what we did is we traveled on the 2nd and we came back on the 16th. Right. Sorry, the 14th. Yeah. It was a Friday, the 14th. And throughout the holiday, we had a lovely, lovely time. I didn't realize until I started looking back at some of my pictures that I seemed to be very keely, you know, leaning over a little bit, tend to be a bit curled up as opposed to being the usual myself. So, the story short, I arrived back in the country on 14th. Originally aimed to coming back into the UK on the 16th. Okay. Guess who collapsed on the 16th? In England. Wow. Me. So what happened is the question we ask ourselves between the 14th and the 16th. How did the holiday become a 12 to a 14 to a 12-day? Yeah. So I'm forever grateful for that conversation and for what happened, whoever was looking after me, because if I had collapsed in the US, they really would not have had my blood type, my structures and stuff. Yeah. And just to give some validation to this, when I collapsed, I was 2 hours away from not being alive. Wow. And at the tender age, you could say, of 31 at the time. You could have been in a position where if you hadn't received the necessary medical treatment within 2 hours, then it's possible you wouldn't have been here today. So obviously there's a lot of connection with everything that's happened, and you feel that it's all interconnected in some way. Deeply. Yeah.
how has that impacted on the way you make business decisions now? Because you've come out of that and you've started all sorts of different types of, I mean, I know you get involved in psychometric profiling and personality traits and checking on different things to ensure that the people, not only the ones that you're mentoring are suited to you, but you're also going to be the right person for them.
And also how one can adapt so that we are suited to our mentees. So even if a mentee comes to me with, which every individual, Alfred Korzybski teaches that perspective. We all understand the perspective coming from the latter house psychologists, but 1931, a gentleman called Alfred Korzybski, a Polish-American, he wrote a beautiful book called Science and Sanity. And in there he says that we are meaning-making machines. The reality of our life bases upon our internal meaning that we ascribe. So if you don't know his work, I'm sure most of your listeners and viewers will probably know something like the map is not the territory. Now the map is not territory, which is assigned to amazing psychologists such as neurolinguistics, NLP, but actually it's coming from his work. It's in his book. It's clearly there. 1931. It says the map is not the territory, which then falls onto what we were just touching on before the interview, that every human being has their own internal perception of the world and their own version of the world, right? So that's the principle and understanding. Sorry, I interjected in your conversation there.
No, that's fine. Perfectly fine. I mean, it brings me back to this, when we talk about business, right? We talk about being innovative and stuff. And what you've just mentioned about you being the character and having your own particular way of describing or understanding the world around you. There's a word called sonda. I don't know whether you've ever come across it. I think it's sondas. And the funny thing is, it's actually quite a new word. Somebody just made it up, and they ascribed, or the way they describe it is something which it's the notion of you being the main character and everybody else is extras in your play. So and I really found that fascinating, because in reality, that's really what we feel, don't we? As individuals, we are the main character in our story, and everybody else is extras, aren't they? But what I'm trying to, I suppose, what I want to steer this conversation towards is how this kind of mindset has impacted your business decisions. So you had those businesses that you had up until when you fell ill, and if I remember correctly, you made some changes and you started some new things after that because your mindset changed.
Totally.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
I can. So what happened is obviously with this near-death experience, I was 2 hours away from life. So I possibly felt at the time maybe I was a little bit aggressive about the fact, or uncomfortable, the why me type syndrome. But then very quickly, I think I spent 2 months in hospital and 11 months away from the group of companies and my families and everybody else under the notion of toxins such as, morphines, etc. The scenario was that at that particular time, just to put a bit of impact back towards it, that, you're talking a 31-year-old, I'd spent my time in that environment. I had a young family, my wife was only 29 years old, core of my life. I'm the youngest of 8 children as well. So I was the youngest of them all. I have 1 brother and another 6 sisters as well, which I'm really blessed with. And at the time I had 3 children. We'd just had our son, we had 2 daughters and a son. And the irony was that it's something very impersonal to myself, that my wife had lost my father-in-law, her father, at the age of 10. So it was funny, or should I say spooky, or whichever way you want to see it. The reality was it was supposed to be, where my daughter was at 10 years old at the same stage when I fell ill. So the reality of life really sort of impacted and hit me. I had a lot of time to sort of renegotiate my brain and understand. And the true understanding was that I was always a spiritual individual. And
before you continue, you mentioned something interesting. You said that you renegotiated with your brain.
Yep.
How do you renegotiate with your brain?
Beautiful. So what happened is I was always, I'll connect it back to the conversation if I may. So I was always a spiritual individual. But what happens is, in one's life, there is a time, usually that 27, 28, 29 sort of age, when questions start to happen. And the questions align themselves because after the age of 21, you start to fit your accuracies of what you actually are and who you are. Your language will change, and you'll say things like, "No, that's not how I do it," or "I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning," or I don't leave until the job's done. So this is now it's what we call sealed conversation. So your brain starts to enact I ams, your intensity of life seems to switch to learning to I am and performing in the 20s. So the context of my conversation was that at this time, when 28, you start to get what we classify as everybody gets within, so we meaning behavioral psychologists and people in this sort of environment, we understand that there seems to be an ignition of spiritual understanding. Somebody starts to ask a question. You start to get feelings that, why is it that everything's right or wrong? And you've been through that. I can see it in your face right now.
At the same age as well, I think it was 26, 27, when I went through a bit of a real 360 on myself.
So that was only last year, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So honestly, what happens is you start to ask these internal questions, and my question of I started to negotiate myself, because we always have what we classify as a conscious brain, which is the beta brain, and we always have what we classify as the alpha brain, which is AKA also known as the animal instinct brain. So now we're talking about instinct, because you use that quite subjectively within your and powerfully within your trainings. Instinct. What is instinct? So instinct is when you have a feeling. For example, if I gave you an example, a lion would be hungry and it would eat. But as soon as the lion has eaten, you can walk in front of the lion. Because he is not getting up. And if it was a female, would not get up, she would not get up either. It's not interested. They're digesting now. So if they're thirsty, they drink. If they're hungry, they eat. They don't have a larder, but they keep the excess meat in and keep it chilled so they can pull it out later. So it's a now game. That's what animal or alpha brain is. Then we have a negotiation ability, which comes into our beta brain, if I can explain. I go into this a lot more depth within the SynaGus methodology, and I'm really humbled you're asking me. So in the beta brain, it's when we the first time Homo sapien had what we classify as or we think Homo sapien had a conscious brain instilled. At which case we ask us a question. We'd say, what if? So if I give you a scenario, the what ifs start. So that doesn't mean that we don't have any conscious brain until 28. Of course not. I'm trying to say we start to become much more aware of why we do things. Because we've had the ceiling of our learning, and we're starting saying, oh, I think it's a bit more about me. I do it this way. No, I don't go there. No, I go here. No, I'm not really much of a pubber. Oh, no, I watch movies. No, I don't watch movies. So you start to get very sealed. At which case, what is the next learning? So we're in constant learning. I mean, my faith is Sikhism. And if you pronounce it correctly, it should be Sikh. And if you pronounce it within the English tongue, it's Sikh. But if you look at the traditional Punjabi pronunciation of Sikh actually, and the translation of that means learn. So as the reality of it is that we are only disciples, we are students consistently. So the moment that actually hits your head, when you start realizing there is something more to learn, we start to excel ourselves. So now if we turn it into the English explanation, when we say seek, we're also looking for something there as well. So how cool is that?
It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, I think most of the mainstream religions have that ethos or grounding of learning. If we go even from the Judeo-Christian faiths, it's all about learning. Even in Islam, the first words which were recited to the Prophet Muhammad were Iqra, which in Arabic means read, recite.
Absolutely. Read and recite. Read, understand, and recite. Because it's not so simple to explain like that.
It's all about the learning. So sorry, continue.
So in context, the Sikh faith itself actually is a faith where it's really quite heavily what we call, let me give you an example, it's actually very spiritual pathway. It is a spiritual humanity-based process, and the religious name or pathway is Sikhism. So that's in my poor understanding, I suppose. I'm just going to share this how I understand and see the world. So it's a very acceptant faith of everything else, and actually we believe that everything actually is one. There is no right or wrong way. It's the only way. There's everyone has the truth. So I really confer with your beautiful alignment of all faiths have the same manage. So going back to the context, if I may, questions were asked. And the negotiation starts. The beta brain starts to negotiate with the unconscious brain or the unconscious brain, what we call the heart chakra or the brain chakra. And we start thinking about why do I want to do things? And then with this why question, we have what's called a slight disparity or a disalignment. You could say in this modern language of behavioral psychology called a duality. So we start to pull a little bit of a duality, which within itself actually stunts your acceleration. So the moment you realize that you've actually got this duality going on, you can realign it as quick as you can. So the point is that I created a methodology I spoke about on TED.
Yes, you were.
Last year.
Sukhi was actually one of the speakers on TED, which is it's an international platform where international speakers. Or actually, it's more of a request you receive, isn't it?
Yes, you don't just.
You don't just turn up or request.
You don't apply.
You don't apply. They ask you to come on. So a fantastic achievement there.
And within that process, what happened is I actually shared a 7-step process, which if anybody's interested, I'm sure you give them a link and go there. A 7-step process where people can make decisions in a conscious, systematic way. But also, within those 7 steps, it actually ignites your unconscious mind as well. So a story within itself. So what really changed in my world, I started to think differently. I started wanting different things. And really, I started thinking less about what I wanted and more about what I could deliver to the world. And that inside, outside, that looking inwards, I, started to move towards, if I could take a spiritual understanding, started moving towards the outer self. So it's about you. So how can I help you as opposed to you helping you? Yeah. So I just wanted to try to deliver. And so I started to, beg your pardon, I started to just collate my thoughts and start thinking I want to change. So 2006 was a big change for me. I kind of came back to business around 2007, after this period of time. And I literally took a hard decision. I didn't want to do what I was doing. So I kept onto the portfolio, kept the property businesses, all those sort of things were all fine. And I just literally told my brother, to his dismay, I'm stopping. I'm not going to be involved in the retail organization anymore. I've decided I'll walk and do my way. And he sort of went, yeah, sure. Which case I don't think he really understood it. And then around 2008 was my last year. 2009, January onwards, I didn't open any more shops. Didn't close any more shops, didn't do any more retailing directly. I've still been involved in merchant trading and importing stuff and that kind of stuff, not gone. And I have a very different perspective of life as well. But I started to, I started to itch my itch. And it was about trying to create something a bit bigger. I just want to point, this is the poignant point, and then I'll hand back to yourself if I may. Sorry, I'm talking too much, team. I get very excited about these sort of things and in a very humble way. So today we have a platform and I help, thousands of people across the globe, which I'm truly, truly humbled for. 37,000 and I have nearly 700 live clients where I'm helping through mentoring programs, which we'll talk later. But I think the reality of life hit towards me and I realized that I had been brought up understanding that none of us are going to take anything with us. I truly understand that. But that, to me, I used to dismiss it because it felt very negative. I'm not sure if you feel that, guess what? You're not going to take anything with you. You're not going to take anything with you. You're going to leave it all here. It becomes very, it sort of slows you down a little bit. And I used to ignore it, even knowing it. But after I think a bit more thinking, I started to realize what it really, truly meant. And the reality is that in the Sikh faith and in all faiths as well, you're going to leave it all here, but then it puts a bit of a magnifying glass on it and says, if you are going to leave it here, I think the bigger question is, if you're going to leave everything here, have you accepted that? And the moment you accept that, it's about, what are you going to leave here?
Very good question.
What are you going to leave here? And so that, we could say, legacy, processes, thoughts. At that point, it became a delirious mission of mine to just share everything I had. Because I had to leave a body of work within other human beings, within the waste, because I thought I felt that was my calling.
So it's motivation, isn't it?
Yeah, within
because if you've not left anything, what use have you made of your time? In the context of in the context of that spiritual or conscious or whatever people would like to call it within that framework. So you now are in a position where you are sharing your journey, your wisdom, your teachings across the world to people in several different continents. And you've created your own programs in which you do that. I suppose one of the questions the audience may be thinking is, through the realms of this whole spiritual paradigm, how do I connect with myself consciously and subconsciously or unconsciously, depending on which way you look at it, so that how can that benefit me and my business? Because most of us, when we have conversations, and I have conversations with lots of different types of business people, and I will continue to do so on the P2G Live platform, and we'll be talking about technical stuff, we'll be talking about PR, we'll be talking about marketing, we'll be talking about sales, we'll be talking about IT and whatever else there is out there. this is obviously very different, and I'm sure the audience will have realized this is a very different kind of a conversation.
I can be very technical if you really want me to, but
no, that's great.
I get the feeling that your vibrations are a different flow.
Yeah, I mean, we were having that connection earlier on before we even started this. But I think from the audience perspective, one of the key questions could be, I'm just thinking from their point of view, we've obviously spoken very in depth. Well, for some of them, it may be very much in depth. They may not have explored this side to business before. But how does that connect with business? How does that connect with the decisions you make? Okay. How does that connect with the thought process, the mindset? I mean, you mentioned something really good there, which is the fact that if we're not going to take anything with us, what exactly are you leaving behind? Yeah. So that's a good question, because that's motivation to leave a legacy. What else can you share with the audience, which from a spiritual perspective or conscious, subconscious, unconscious perspective, what is it? What does it mean? The psychological perspective of the business, because it's not all mechanical and it's not all technical. There's a lot of psychology which goes behind the motivation to run a business and to continue it to grow. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my father says very, very simply, he says, at the end of the day, you can't see the fragrance of a rose.
Yeah.
Doesn't dismiss that it's there.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just a lovely thought just to leave you in the context. So the reality is that how do we align ourselves in a conscious, unconscious, subconscious, whichever way you want to talk about it. The reality is that it starts off with great questions. Yeah. And I realized that the best deals that I did were when I was in my intuition and I just made an intuitive decision, and they were the highest and most lucrative deals that I had. So I looked for the flow. Now, we can all live off what we call conscious will. Do you understand this? So you can wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to get up, today's the day, that's it, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And that works, absolutely it can. But I'm sure your audience has had in the past where you have what we call one of those dull moments or days where you just wake up and think, I can't be bothered to get out of bed today, I don't fancy getting out, whatever. Yeah. And to the extent that I feel tired, maybe I'm spiritually worn down, energetically worn down. Yeah. The reality is that in life, when we look at product life cycles, and I'm very aware that you're in that, you have educated in that flow as well. You have what we call an introduction period, an intro period. And then it peaks off. Without going through the 7 steps of it, it peaks off to what we classify at some stage a cash cow period. Your actual energy level is exactly the same. So the question to yourself is that if you run on just will alone, you will do a peak and a drop, a peak and a drop. So I'm not sure if any of the audience here has ever experienced what we call I'm great, I'm great, I'm great, which is what we call the yo-yoing of energy. Yeah. Well, there is actually a scientific process behind this. Yeah. Now, I will admit that I've attached some clarities of spirituality behind it as well. And this is what I do in all of my training, in all of my educations, and all of my mentoring I share. But let's just stick to the practical flow for a second. Sure. The practical flow is that basically, it's what we classify as, we have, if I can be very clear, and I want to really give some energy of focus here as well, that we have two, what we classify as egos. There is an ego which is what is modernly or remotely or majority of the time seen as that egotistical, I am this and I am that, which is actually what I call the ignorant ego. Okay, so this is a part of the SynaGus methodology. And then there's the other ego. And by the way, Islam says this as well, and so does all the other faiths. I fully understand that, and I respect it. So it is without a doubt not my stuff. Everything I talk about is from upstairs, wherever it's coming through. So we have an outer ego, but we also have what we call a preservation ego. And the preservation ego is what allows you to get up in the morning. It allows you to be useful to other people. It allows you to dress yourself well. It allows you to brush your teeth. The basic simplicities of life. Without this self-value, which is also coming from a section of ego, there would be no action. So the question here is inner and outer ego. Now, how does this relate to our question of energy, of focus, of ambition and creativity and flow? When to get into flow, which is the cash cow period of time, there has to be an alignment of your will, of your want, of who it's for, what it's for, and how it will actually help you in life, and in specific, what if all those questions come into context. But with ego, we have, if you run just on your will, which is basically the external version of ego, the version that we're trying to maintain and control, you end up with what's classified as ego depletion, which is what I call. And this depletes not the aggressive, overt ego. It actually starts to damage and retract the helpful ego, the ego that actually is preserving you, the ego that's necessary for life, that's necessity for you to be valuable to anybody. And whether it comes to selling or not selling, it's the bit that comes up which you usually think, oh, that's my soft nature, that's my integrity that comes up. Well, the integrity is fed from that positive ego. There's a negative ego, positive ego. So when we run on ego depletion, we have a flow within my context of SynaGus methodology that you boost yourself. You're in that position on what we call the will to do something, and at some stage that will naturally tapers off. So it's a bit like a turbo. It cuts in, and when it cuts in, it goes boom. And then when your foot's off the accelerator, it goes down, and it takes that same gestation period to lift it back up again. So the question here arises that how can you manage this ego? How can you manage this will? There's two simple things: strategy and structure.
Brilliant.
They need to be added to will. Yeah. So, for example, if you're building a building like this, we're on the third or fifth floor here. You can imagine running up and down with a pail of water, or you can imagine having a scaffolding around the building, which then assists you to be safe and move up and down as well. So the story short, if I may, if you have the will to do something, always find somebody, team, to go and give you the strategy and the structure. And if you have the strategy and structure, go and find somebody to give you the emotional will to get up and move. So when we're talking about behavioral psychology, the inner psychometrics of your life, it really is the key. And I have 3 steps within there. I'll talk about it in a second, but reality is that you need to marry your will and the strategy and the structure together. With that balance, you have a constant flow, which means that only then can you get to a position. We all know these big words, the buzzwords called leverage and You can't get to that leverage stage without the strategy and flow mixing together.
True. If somebody was wanting to find out more about strategy, structure, the kind of things that we've already discussed, psychometric profiling and stuff like that, what would you advise them to do?
Well, I'm going to be biased because I believe that we have structures, and we have also, very importantly, may I share a website address?
Yeah. Go for it.
So it's called BGA, that's Bravo Golf Alpha, blueprint.com, which is basically the Business Growth Accelerator blueprint. And it's a bit of a mouthful, hence why it's reduced down to BGA Blueprint. When you go onto that website, you'll see 4 beautiful videos that are absolutely content heavy, and they're free. But what I talk about there is we do what's called an incubation or an accelerator for any business. Okay. Even if you're a conscious business or we classify as a spiritual business, whichever. So through the SynaGus methodology, I've created a 7-step, but it's actually we deliver.
Tell us a bit more about SynaGus methodology.
Yeah, it's what I've been talking about most of the time, that balance of it. Yeah. So thank you. There's 6 steps within this methodology where you can put whichever business you are in, whether you're a service-led business or a product-led business, whether you're a therapist or a service consultant, you can get involved over 3 days of incubation directly with myself. I believe very, very highly. It doesn't make a difference whether I'm established and was financially free at 27. It makes no relevance to anybody. I thoroughly enjoy unlocking individuals. So we go through a 6-step process. The first one being actually revisiting your plan and your structure. Then we work on who you are as a person, which is your unlocking of yourself, which is very much connected to what you talk about as well, Majid. So I really, truly align humbly with yourself.
Thank you.
In the context of, we talk about a 3-step process of who you are truly on the inside, not your external mask. Yeah. We go into your unconscious mind, and we scientifically, by the way, deliver a report, which then you can allow yourself to see how you actually see the world, that uniqueness, that how I see the world, and what you were talking about earlier on, the everybody else is a spectator, or what we call, extras. So you start to learn yourself, and then we also teach you in the same day, in the same segment, to learn to what we call acknowledge other people's model of the world as well. Yeah. So once you've got those 2 parameters in place, we then teach you how to adapt to them very quickly, which is the 3 steps. So learn yourself, learn others, and learn to adapt. Yeah. Now that, just to give you an example, has been paramount to the secret of my success. If I can classify anything I've done as successful, that's the key. Then we move into what we classify day 2 in the morning. We walk into what I talk about in TED. It's the actual DFT, which is the daily focused time. Now, it's actually a philosophy around time management, because I go to the underlying challenge that business has, and actually aligns it with the psychometric and shows them I show them the areas and the times they should be doing certain key tasks. So sometimes you wake up in the morning and think, I'm going to make some sales today. A, you're not getting the sales. You're not seem to be vibrating with the sales. You don't seem to be aligning with it. I'll give you the answer why. So we go through that process and I should say to them, do you realize there's a bit missing? So I align it with spiritual understanding, yogic understanding, and all the philosophies in there with humbleness. In the afternoon, we then start talking about how it moves into how to sell without selling. And this is basically the truth behind sales. You talk about this regularly. It's something I've been, for 27 years, I've been sharing the same philosophy. It's how I was taught for 7 generations. Don't sell people, give them what they want. We've all heard the analogy in the process of knocking on 10 doors with a glass of water. Yeah. But you can knock on 10 doors with a glass of water, asking, okay, so you don't want the water, what else do you want? If you go with a glass of water, you might get 1 or 2 sales out of 10. And the option you've got, I'm sure you use the analogy, but you go with a glass of water holding your conversation, say, what would you like to drink? And then say, no problem, I'll be back in an hour's time and I'll bring it for you. And if you're clever enough, you'll take a deposit. But other than that, you go to the doors and at least you can increase that maybe to 8 out of 10. So we increase that process. So we understand how, now that you've learned kind of like what your mission is, why you're getting involved in business in the first place, which is day one, the second half of day one, understanding yourself deeply and understanding how to identify other people, it then walks into your time management because you've got to be able to call at certain times with your own body clocks and structure. And then in the afternoon on day 3, day 2, we talk about how to actually align with other people's sales program, their structure alignment. And then on day 3, which is the last day, we go into profitability because people think sales is sales, vanity. We go into the sanity elements. Brilliant. We talk about the hard graft of figures and information, what it actually talks about, but in a real soft way of, I don't like things complicated. I really make them very simple to understand. I hope this is getting what I'm coming across. And then on the final section, we talk specifically about retention of your clients and increasing their sales within yourself. Now, we all know the 80-20, I understand that, but there's some sciences behind it. Of course. You go through a whole 3 days called the BGA Blueprint. It's mind-blowing. When you look on the page, you'll see some of the testimonials of people who have done it across the globe. And it's also backed by the British Chamber of Commerce, it's backed by KPMG, it's backed by Forbes, and a number of people which I'm humbled to be a judge with as well, and a business mentor for. And basically, it's what we classify in Punjabi, we'll say Sampuran. Sampuran means it's actually very complete, but the difference is specific. If anybody has studied with myself or learned from myself, and I just for focus, I don't believe I've got anything good to give. You'll see that I'm a very individualistic sort of trainer. It doesn't make a difference whether I've got 100, 500, or whether I've got 10. Everybody gets a one-to-one training.
Brilliant. You've mentioned a few key elements there with business. You mentioned time management. You mentioned sales. You've mentioned productivity, behavioral psychology, and these are all, I suppose, the key terms which have possibly helped you in business.
100%. I only deliver what's helped me.
Yeah. So, in summary, just to round up this conversation, because usually we're on for like 40 minutes.
Oh no!
And you know what?
I've ruined your segment.
You know what? We could probably carry on for hours. It's been 50 minutes nearly, and we didn't even realize.
I'm sorry, team. I'm really sorry.
We were just getting warmed up, I think.
Oh wow.
But if we were to say in summary from these elements, what did you mention again? Time management, productivity?
So in order, we would have basically learning yourself first.
Learning yourself first.
Learning other people.
Self-awareness.
Yeah, self-awareness, awareness of other people. Yeah. Respecting their space and adapting correctly. We're going to time management to understand how you can philosophize your brain and function your peak times of working, how to actually sell without selling, and humbly connect with people, and really give them a service, connect with them truly, move into an element of actually truly understanding what business profit really is, and at what level is it contribution, at what level is it become profit, and how to run a successful business. And then finally also to understand how to maximize the customer, the one customer, the 10 customers you've actually really got, and actually really serve them properly. And that's the growth. I mean, if you look at Walmart, you'll understand the principal understanding there was exactly the same. He listened to his customers and listened to his staff, and that's how the network grew.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Well, you know what? I wish we could carry on because I was personally just getting warmed up, and I didn't realize how quickly the time had gone past. Do we have any questions, by the way? Oh, brilliant.
And by the way, before the questions come in, I just want to thank you for being here and listening to my conversation. It's been slightly different And now we're going to go for the questions, I think. Thank you very much, Majid, as well, for having me here.
Okay, so there's a question here. How do you balance spirituality with business? How do you know where to draw the line between heart and head-based decisions? Is that from a follow-on question from Sarit? Yeah. So Sarit says absolutely work to live, not live to work. So
hi Sarit, because I know I know you very well, and thank you. We were actually texting just earlier on today. So if I can share, it depends on whether you're what we classify as an introverted energy or an extroverted energy, because that's what's going to flip it. So the reality is, let's go for an extroverted energy first, if I may. And by the way, Sarit, you're an introverted energy. So extroverted energies would be something
for free on PTG Live.
Bless you. And I wasn't a pompous answer. It's just I kind of know you. So extroverted energies should always go with their heart first and then put the strategy in place. And that's basically the strategic part is what we call the conscious brain, and that's that brain. And the heart element is the spiritual element. Does this feel good? Do I want to do this? How will I do this? Comes second. Does that make sense? And then if you go the other way around and become introverted energy, the introverted energy has to put the tactic, the strategy, and the planning first, which is the consciousness. And then you move into what we classify thereafter, the spirit and the understanding of, do I actually want to do this? Do I even feel as I want to do it? So I hope that's answered the question. Depending on which one you are, if you're a person who tends to regenerate yourself in your private space, then you're probably an introverted energy. If you love to be around characters and personalities like Majid, you'll probably be yourself what we classify as you'll probably be a bit more what we call extroverted in energy. So you recharge in the third person's energy, or you recharge in your personal energy. So if you're personal, then you strategize first, and then you ask yourself, is this really what I want to do? And if you're an extroverted energy, you literally go, I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to do. Now let's work out the strategy.
Yeah.
And actually, I have to repeat back. If you watch the video DFT, which is Daily Focused Time Management, actually there's a hidden agenda behind there as well. I have to be open and honest with you. The 7 steps naturally align. If you follow the 7 steps, it naturally aligns your conscious and your unconscious brain. So it actually affects every psychometric behaviorally. So you'll be able to balance yourself just by following the 7 steps. That's the honest way.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, for Sukhi. We have Majid, who's probably also familiar with you.
Nijjar, I think, yes.
Yeah, Majid says, Sukhi helped me to find my way back to my faith. I searched for something that centers me. He helped me realize what it was, not by telling me, but asking me questions. This helped me move forward, both personally and professionally. So it's a general comment, but I suppose there's a good lesson there. I mean,
thank you, Majid.
Most mentors and coaches specifically need to know how to ask the right questions. So, and then the answer comes from within themselves. So
thank you. God bless you, and thank you very much. And you just keep going. Too. Can I just share something very quickly about the mentoring and coaching, if I may?
Yeah.
So a coach is a trained individual who can unlock other people's language understanding and their value of themselves, and doesn't necessarily actually have to have what we call industry knowledge. But a mentor, just to be very clear with yourself, is somebody who actually has specific industry knowledge and is somewhere, can possibly shortcut somebody's journey and be somewhere with the person beforehand and actually hold their hand and move them there. Now, if you actually get somebody who's attuned is in skill within a coach, as well as the ability to get somebody there quickly,
big bonus.
It's a warm heart. So, yeah,
fantastic. Thank you very much.
Sorry about that. Thank you.
No. Thank you very much. It's very valuable. I mean, some people do get confused between the difference between coaches and mentors.
That's right. Yes.
But are we going to have to, sadly, cut it short, cut it there? I'm going to say once again, thank you very much, Sukhi, for your attendance here and joining us here on Pathway to Grow and the PTG Live platform. It's been an honor and a pleasure. I'm sure we're going to continue this conversation. We were having this conversation before we went live, yes. And we could probably carry on for hours.
I would.
So
I think if anybody, I just want to say humbly, honestly, I started with this conversation. I'll end with it again. I sincerely thank you very much for allowing me to fulfill my inner mission of helping as many people as I can on the planet. And I'm sure if anyone wants to get hold of me, they can find my details on the tag.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got the business boardroom, you've got the business growth accelerator blueprint at bgablueprint.com.
May I offer something? Just, I know it's unplanned, I do apologize.
Okay.
But we've got a 2-week window at the moment, so if you don't mind, may I share?
Go for it.
I have an online platform. It's a membership site where I specifically go through all of my journeys and knowledge, and actually I fulfilled a load of trainings and very high-end trainings. That's what I specialize in, getting trainings out of people. It's a bit like a university, but it's called the inspiredbusiness.club.
Okay.
But for the next 2 weeks, it's completely free. So if you get yourself signed up, go now and sign yourself up onto there, straight away on the freemium model. You'll basically, when it does go back up to £27, you won't be charged forever. So it's a little humble gift back. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. There's a gift for you guys. How long have they got to do that? 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Within the 2 weeks, if you sign up, then that'll be free for them forever.
Free. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. So thank you very much, Sukhi, once again for attending here. Next month, it's the... Okay, it's not even going to be a month, is it? Are we in May already? Yes, we are. Losing my marbles.
The 2nd of May.
Just about, it is. So next month, on the 20th of June, we have our next guest is going to be Tom Mallins. Tom is another specialist in sales. So that's going to be. I've already got ideas, and I think we already get the feeling it's going to be a fiery kind of a session at the next one, because Tom is a specialist in the field of selling and getting businesses to grow their client base, and has fantastic ideas, and he's a bit of a specialist in that field. So it's going to be a pleasure to have Tom on the show with us next month. So do put that in your diaries on the 20th of June at 7 p.m. We'll be back here at the Pathway Studios. For now, have a great evening, and those of you who are around, I will see you tomorrow at the Chutney and Chat networking platform hosted by Abid Khan, where I will be keynoting. So it's an honor to have been asked to deliver the keynote speech for that particular event, and I'm really excited about that, genuinely excited about that. And we've got some fantastic guests coming. So those of you who are going to be around, we'll see you there. Otherwise, have a good night, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you very much.
Until next time. Thank you. Thank you.